We got one last Sunday today before Lent. So today's theme, before we wrap up ordinary time, is truth and goodness. Okay? We're going to talk about truth and goodness today. We heard in the first reading that the fruit of a tree will bear witness to the care given to the tree earlier. And Jesus, he expands on that a little bit in the gospel when he says, a good tree produces good fruit, a rotten tree produces rotten fruit. You don't really get one from the other. And in just the same way, a good person produces good works, an evil person produces evil works. That is the pattern. And to be sure, sometimes you'll get a bad person that produces some kind of good result every once in a while, and all good people do harm from time to time. That much is true. However, that pattern is plenty well accurate enough to be taken seriously. Good people produce good works. If we believe that we are good people, then we've got to let that come out. We have got to express that somehow, because if we don't, then we're people who are all talk. And as you well know, talk is cheap. All of that's pretty straightforward, I'd say, pretty easy to understand, but we're missing one thing we got to add, and that's truth. Goodness produces good works and truth. And to expand on that notion a little bit, I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, Peter Kreeft. He's never actually met me. He's just a great author I love. This is from his very excellent book, 40 Reasons I'm Catholic. I don't have time to read the whole reason. I'm going to read about a third of it. But this is from reason number 25. I'm Catholic because Catholics, like their saints, are a little crazy. I paid close attention to this one. Another thing the saints show us is that what they believe is likely to be true, not because they're clever or intelligent, but because they are good. The coordinates and maps by which the ships of such lives are sailed are right, and therefore they are true. There is an argument here, an argument from goodness to truth, from will to mind, from sanctity to sanity. The two, goodness and truth, must be closely connected, for it is intolerable to think that the human heart is so badly designed and so self-destructively structured that its two absolute ideals, truth and goodness, contradict one another and lead us in opposite directions. How could one of these two greatest powers of the human heart be right and the other wrong? If so, which one is wrong? Which absolute must we betray in order to obey the other? Honesty or holiness? Wisdom or charity? Truth or love? Sanity or sanctity? Is sanctity a desperate attempt to attain goodness without truth? Are saints adults who act like little children playing games with invisible friends? Even in minor worldly affairs, we naturally tend to think that what a good person believes is more likely to be true than what a bad person believes. How much more is this true? How much closer are these two values? The closer we approach God himself and those, the saints, who resemble him the most. That is a very compelling argument for me and for my love of philosophy. There is a connection between truth and goodness, and we all sense it. We all sense it to a certain degree, all right? If your kindly neighbors down the street who are happily married, if they give you relationship advice, you're probably going to take them seriously, to a certain degree at least. How many of you, though, would seriously take dating advice from someone who has an ex with a restraining order against them? I mean, would not your first reaction be, you don't know what you're talking about? We naturally trust people who are kind, compassionate, and good. And we naturally distrust people who are selfish, untruthful, undisciplined, and volatile. It's instinct, really. I have no lack of people in my life who are good and trustworthy, and I have no lack of people who are bad and untrustworthy, and I've had to learn how to differentiate between the people who deserve my trust and respect and those who do not. I do not trust people who are selfish and volatile. They might make a good point every once in a while, but as a general rule, I do not trust them. They are lacking in goodness, and therefore, on a certain level, they are lacking in the truth. To give you the clearest example I can manage for exactly what I'm talking about here, we're going to go back to 2016. It was my first trip to Japan, just vacation. And I didn't want to go alone. I didn't want to be alone in Japan the first time. That seemed problematic. So I went with a group of Americans. And for the most part, that worked out really well, except one guy in the group was a real piece of work. Yeah. He was one of those guys that always had an opinion about everything and had to make his opinion known to everybody about everything, always. If he wasn't talking about metallurgy or Croatia, he would be talking about how bad religion is and how backward my views were. And it got old fast. There was actually another religious person in our group, a younger guy. This guy bullied him because he was younger and quieter than me. I stood up for myself a little bit better. That other guy, I miss him. He might very well make a fine Lutheran minister one day. I really do miss him. But this fella, he was constantly acting like he possessed the truth himself. You know, like he understood reality better than the rest of us. He was smarter than the rest of us. And even though I hadn't read this book at the time, this argument that I read for you about 2 minutes ago, this was exactly what was in my head as I was dealing with him. He was not a good person. He had absolutely zero respect or consideration for anyone or anything besides himself. He was not good, and therefore he did not possess the truth as firmly as he thought he did. I don't have time to tell you everything he did over 2 weeks, but here's a little cross-section for the kind of person he was. One of my first days, I think it was the first day I was in country with them, he said that he thought it was okay to torture animals. They don't have souls. Who cares? It's like taking apart a computer. They're little machines. Right. Another thing he did, while we were all waiting in the common room, because we were all going to go to a museum in the afternoon, you know, we're letting everybody get together, and he was killing time by drawing a Star of David and then drawing swastika shapes over the points of all of the star tips. And he drew a Star of David swastika for the fun of it. You can imagine the look on my face. It was a look that probably said, "What is wrong with you? How are you not aware that's outrageously offensive?" Got one more example. I'll admit it's a little on the silly side, but I think it speaks volumes. A few of us were walking down the street. We were talking, disagreeing about something minor. Not a major conversation, very minor topic. And he said this. This is a direct quote. "No, I'm right and you're wrong. I'm middle class and white. I'm usually correct." Mind you, all of us were middle class, and all of us were white. So it didn't even make any sense. I think my reaction was, you're not allowed to talk anymore. But even ignoring that, how shameful. You know, like what an immature and egotistical thing to say. I'm correct because I'm white? There are some things you're not supposed to, ridiculous. Now, I hope I'm being clear in what I'm trying to teach you today. This guy obviously bothered me. I mean, you can hear the agitation in my voice just reliving these memories. He's the best example I have of someone who was missing something terribly important in his soul. He was lacking a very real part of goodness, and as a result, he was lacking truth at the same time. The way he acted and the way he treated other people are the very best reasons there are to not see the world the way he does. If that's the true face of secular society, that makes me all the more determined to be the exact opposite. And it makes me all the more confident that there is something glorious and noble within Catholicism. I know that church can be boring sometimes. And I know that we have a lot of rules to worry about, more rules than we'd care to deal with. I understand that, but it is worth it. It is worth it because with faith and devotion, with community and morality, comes truth and goodness, sincerity and consideration and courtesy, wisdom and joy. A lot of people out there sacrifice one for the sake of the other. And that is a mistake that none of us have to make. It's actually really simple. It starts right here. It starts with recognizing God as the source and origin of truth and goodness. Those two things come from the same place, God. And if we have truth and goodness in the root of our being, then our lives will bear good fruit at the time of the harvest.